Commander James Harrison stared at his reflection in the polished surface of the Nexarian embassy's crystalline walls, adjusting his formal diplomatic uniform for the 100th time. After 15 years of military service and diplomatic missions across Earth's colonies, he thought he'd seen it all. He was wrong. The Nexarian royal palace stretched above him like a living structure of crystal and light, its transparent spires reaching toward the purple sky of this alien world. As Earth's chief negotiator for the upcoming peace treaty, Harrison knew the stakes couldn't be higher. Humanity needed this alliance. "Commander, they're ready for you," said Lieutenant Walsh, his aide, appearing at his side. The young officer's face reflected the shimmer of the crystal walls, giving her an otherworldly glow. Harrison nodded, squaring his shoulders. "Remember, if anything seems off about the translation devices, signal me immediately. We can't afford another incident like the Centauri massacre." The great doors to the ceremonial chamber swung open silently, revealing a vast circular room filled with Nexarian nobility. Their silvery skin seemed to pulse with internal light, and their four-fingered hands were adorned with rings that sparkled like captured stars. At the chamber's center stood the twin princesses of the Nexarian Empire. Princess Ondira, with her crown of floating crystal shards and flowing robes of midnight blue, watched him with eyes that seemed to hold the depth of space itself. Beside her, Princess Verina's outfit shimmered with the colors of a dying sun, her expression unreadable behind a veil of crystalline threads. Harrison approached the ceremonial circle, his steps measured and precise. The Nexarian High Priest, Master Kalzer, raised his arms, his voice resonating through the chamber in their musical language. Harrison's translator hummed softly, converting the words. "We gather to bind our peoples in peace and unity," the priest intoned. "The Earthborn Commander will participate in the ritual of eternal bonds, sealing our alliance through the sacred tradition of our ancestors." Harrison followed the choreographed movements he'd practiced for weeks, his hands gliding through the air in precise patterns. The twin princesses mirrored his actions, their movements fluid and graceful. The air between them began to shimmer with an ethereal light. What Harrison didn't notice was the slight malfunction in his translator, a tiny glitch that would change everything. As Master Kalzer spoke the ritual words, asking Harrison if he accepted the bonds of alliance, the device translated it simply as bonds. And when Harrison said yes, he unknowingly agreed to much more than a political alliance. The chamber erupted in gasps and murmurs. The crystalline threads of Princess Verina's veil dissolved, revealing a smile that sent chills down Harrison's spine. Princess Ondira's eyes widened slightly, the only indication of surprise on her otherwise composed face. "The bonds are sealed," Master Kalzer announced, his voice carrying a note of something Harrison couldn't quite identify. "Commander Harrison is now bound in marriage to both Princess Ondira and Princess Verina, as our ancient laws demand for those who complete the ritual of eternal bonds." Harrison's blood ran cold. What? He looked between the sisters, his military training barely keeping his composure intact. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake, husband," Ondira said, her voice like silk over steel. "You have joined our royal house, binding Earth to our empire in ways your negotiators never imagined." Verina stepped closer, her fingers brushing his arm. "The question now is, what kind of husband will you be? And more importantly," her eyes met her sister's, "which of us will you choose to rule beside?" Lieutenant Walsh's face had gone pale, her hands frantically working her communication device. But Harrison knew it was too late. The political implications alone were staggering. One wrong move could spark an interstellar incident. "The ceremony is complete," Master Kalzer announced. "Let the celebrations begin, and may the newest member of our royal family prove worthy of the honor bestowed upon him." As the chamber filled with the haunting melodies of Nexarian celebration music, Harrison caught glimpses of calculating looks passing between various court members. He'd walked into something much bigger than a simple diplomatic ceremony, and now he was trapped in a web of alien politics, royal intrigue, and the complicated dynamics between two powerful sisters. What nobody in the chamber knew was that this accident would set in motion events that would shake both Earth and the Nexarian Empire to their cores. The real question wasn't which Princess Harrison would choose, it was whether he could survive long enough to make any choice at all. The celebration feast stretched into the night, but Commander Harrison barely tasted the exotic Nexarian delicacies placed before him. He sat at the high table between his new wives, acutely aware of the political powder keg he now occupied. The great hall sparkled with crystalline light, while hundreds of noble aliens watched his every move. Princess Ondira leaned close, her voice pitched for his ears alone. "You seem tense, Commander. Perhaps you're beginning to understand the gravity of your position." The light played across her silvery skin, creating patterns that seemed to shift with her mood. "I understand that this situation needs to be resolved diplomatically," Harrison replied, keeping his voice steady. "There must be a way to annul the ceremony without damaging relations between our peoples." Princess Verena laughed softly from his other side, the sound like chimes in the wind. "Annulment? Oh no, dear husband. This binding is exactly what we wanted." Harrison's hand tightened on his ornate crystal goblet. "You planned this." "Of course we did," Ondira admitted, her space-dark eyes glinting. "Though I must say, your willing participation made it much easier than we anticipated." Before Harrison could respond, the great doors of the feast hall burst open. Lieutenant Walsh hurried in, her face flushed. She made her way to Harrison, bowing awkwardly to the princesses before leaning down to whisper in his ear. "Sir, we've lost contact with Earth. All communication channels are being blocked." Harrison maintained his composed expression, years of diplomatic training serving him well. "Interesting timing," he said, glancing between the sisters. Verena smiled, her crystalline veil shimmering. "A necessary precaution. We can't have Earth's military rushing in to rescue you before we've had a chance to get to know each other." "And what exactly do you want to know?" Harrison asked, scanning the room for potential allies or escape routes. The guards positioned around the hall seemed to have doubled in number. Ondira's fingers brushed his arm, sending an electric tingle through his uniform. "We want to know if Earth's greatest diplomat is truly as capable as they say. If you can handle the challenges that come with being part of our royal family. And if I can't? Then both our worlds will suffer the consequences," Verena said, her tone light but her words heavy with threat. The feast continued around them, but Harrison's mind raced. The sisters had orchestrated this entire situation, but why? What could they gain from forcing a marriage with an Earth diplomat? His questions were answered later that night when he was escorted to his new chambers, a luxurious suite that was more prison than palace room. Princess Ondira visited first, her midnight blue robes swirling around her as she entered. "Our father is dying," she said without preamble. "The succession must be settled before he passes, and now you're part of that equation." "I'm a pawn in your succession game," Harrison stated, the pieces falling into place. "A pawn?" Ondira smiled. "No, James. You're much more valuable than that. You're the key to legitimizing either my claim to the throne or Verena's. The sister you choose will rule the Nexarian Empire, and by extension, control the alliance with Earth." The door opened again, admitting Verena. "Sharing secrets already, sister. How unlike you to show your hand so soon." "Our husband isn't a fool," Ondira replied. "He would have figured it out eventually." Harrison watched the sisters circle each other, their ancient rivalry palpable in the air between them. "And if I refuse to choose? Then our people will consider Earth's commitment to the alliance insincere," Verena said. "The consequences would be unfortunate." "We're on the edge of Nexarian space," Ondira added. "Our empire is all that stands between Earth and the Void clans. Without our protection, your colonies would be defenseless." Harrison felt the weight of worlds settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about political maneuvering anymore, the safety of Earth's outer colonies hung in the balance. How long do I have to make this choice? Until father draws his last breath, Verena said softly. Which our physicians say could be days, or hours. But don't worry, Andira added, moving toward the door. We'll give you ample opportunity to get to know us both. Starting tomorrow, you'll begin learning what it truly means to be part of the Nexarian royal family. The sisters left him alone with his thoughts, their subtle perfumes lingering in the air. Harrison moved to the chamber's window, gazing out at the crystalline spires of the palace and the strange constellations beyond. He was a soldier and a diplomat, trained to handle crisis situations. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. Somewhere in this palace, a dying emperor's last breaths were counting down to a decision that would shape the future of two civilizations. And Harrison had to find a way to turn this forced marriage to his advantage before it sparked an interstellar war. Dawn on Nexaria brought no comfort to Commander Harrison. The purple sky outside his chamber window was streaked with crystalline clouds that refracted light in impossible patterns. His military-issued tablet remained dead, all communications with Earth still blocked. But Harrison hadn't spent the night idle, he'd been planning. A soft chime announced the arrival of his first teacher, Master Kalzer, the same priest who had performed the marriage ceremony. The elderly Nexarian's silvery skin had a translucent quality that made him appear almost ghostly in the morning light. Commander, Kalzer bowed slightly. Today you begin your education in our ways. Harrison studied the priest carefully. Starting with how you engineered my translator's malfunction. Kalzer's expression didn't change, but the light patterns beneath his skin shifted noticeably. Perceptive. But incorrect. I did not engineer the malfunction, I merely failed to prevent it. Why? Because the Emperor commanded it. Kalzer moved to the window, his robes whispering against the crystal floor. But perhaps not for the reasons you imagine. Before Harrison could press further, the door opened again. Princess Andira swept in, her midnight blue robes replaced by formal court attire that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. That's enough history for now, Master Kalzer. The commander has duties to attend. Harrison found himself whisked through the palace corridors, Andira's guard detail forming a precise formation around them. They entered a vast chamber he hadn't seen before, a war room. Holographic displays showed star systems and fleet movements, while Nexarian officers moved purposefully between control stations. Impressive, Harrison said, genuinely meaning it. The technology here was decades ahead of Earth's best systems. This is where we coordinate the defense of our borders, Andira explained. Including the protection we provide to Earth's colonies. She waved a hand, and the displays zoomed in on the frontier regions. The Void clans grow bolder each cycle. Without our fleet deployments, your outer settlements would have fallen months ago. Harrison studied the tactical displays, his military training kicking in. These deployment patterns, they're not just defensive. You're preparing for something bigger. A slight smile curved on Andira's lips. Very good. You see why we needed someone with your particular expertise? The coming war will reshape this sector of space. Earth must be ready to play its part. Under your leadership, you mean? I would be a strong ally for your people, Andira stepped closer, her voice dropping. Verena lacks the will to do what must be done. She still believes in diplomacy with the Void clans. Harrison was about to respond when movement caught his eye. In one of the tactical displays, a small fleet of ships appeared to be moving in an unusual pattern. Before he could focus on it, Andira waved her hand, changing the display. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of military briefings and cultural lessons. By midday, Harrison's head was spinning with new information, but one detail kept nagging at him. Those ships he'd glimpsed. His afternoon was claimed by Princess Verena, who took him to the palace's vast library. Ancient texts and data crystals lined walls that stretched up into shadows. Knowledge is power in our empire, she said, running her fingers along a row of crystals. Especially knowledge of the past. Like the true purpose of the ritual of eternal bonds? Harrison asked. Verina's crystalline veil shimmed as she turned to face him. The ritual was created in a time of civil war, designed to bind warring houses together. It was never meant to be used as it was with you. Then why? Because Father insisted. His last command before falling ill. She pulled a data crystal from the shelf, its surface glowing faintly. Would you like to know why? Before she could continue, an alarm blared through the palace. Verina's expression changed, fear flickering across her features. No, it's too soon. Guards burst into the library. Your Highness, you're needed in the medical wing. The Emperor. Harrison found himself quickly escorted back to his chambers, but not before he glimpsed the controlled chaos erupting in the palace corridors. The Emperor was dying, yes, but something else was happening. Those ships he'd seen in the war room, the strange patterns. Late that night, unable to sleep, Harrison stood at his window watching distant ships move through Nexaria's purple sky. A soft noise made him turn. Lieutenant Walsh stood in a shadowy corner of his room, having somehow slipped past the guards. Sir, she whispered, I've discovered something. About the Emperor's illness. About why he really wanted you here. She glanced nervously at the door. And about what's really happening in the Void Clan's territory. Harrison moved silently to join her in the shadows. Tell me. The Emperor wasn't just looking for a diplomatic marriage, sir. He was looking for someone who could spot a military deception. Those ships you saw today in the war room. She swallowed hard. They're not defending against the Void Clans. They're arming them. The pieces started falling into place in Harrison's mind, the blocked communications, the rushed marriage, the carefully controlled information he was being shown. But one question remained. Which sister is behind it? Walsh's answer was lost in the sudden blare of alarms. The purple sky outside turned crimson as emergency lights activated across the city. Through his window, Harrison watched as dozens of ships began rising from hidden launch bays beneath the palace. The hidden agenda was about to become very public indeed, as emergency sirens wailed through the crystalline corridors. Harrison grabbed Lieutenant Walsh's arm, pulling her deeper into the shadows of his chamber. Tell me everything. Now. The Emperor discovered that one of his daughters was secretly arming the Void Clans, Walsh whispered urgently. He engineered your marriage to expose the traitor. Your military background, your diplomatic training, he needed someone who could see the patterns. The door burst open before she could continue. Princess Andira strode in, her ceremonial robes replaced by sleek battle armor that pulsed with internal light. Commander, you're needed in the war room. The Void Clans have launched an attack. Harrison met her gaze steadily. Have they? Or are they following a predetermined plan? Andira's eyes narrowed. Choose your next words carefully, husband. Our ships are moving with too much precision for this to be a surprise attack, Harrison said, his tactical training taking over. Those fleet movements I saw earlier, they weren't random. They were positioning for a coordinated strike. Against traitors who would see our empire fall, Andira snapped. The Void Clans aren't our true enemy. The rot lies within our own walls. Guards filed into the room, weapons ready. Through the window, Harrison watched as more ships rose from the palace's hidden bays, their crystal drives painting streaks of light across the crimson sky. My sister has grown weak, Andira continued, her voice cold. She would have us negotiate while our enemies gather strength. Sometimes, fire must be met with fire. And Earth's colonies? Where do they fit in your plan? A slight smile curved Andira's lips. They will learn to accept new protection, under stronger leadership. The implications were clear. Earth's colonies would become vassals, not allies. Before Harrison could respond, new alarms blared. Princess Verina's voice echoed through the palace's communication system. The Emperor is dead. By ancient law, I claim the throne and declare my sister a traitor to the empire. Andira's expression hardened. So be it. She turned to her guards. Take the commander to the secure bunker. If he resists. The wall exploded inward in a shower of crystal shards. Through the breach poured troops in Verina's colors, led by the princess herself. Her battle armor was lighter than Andira's, designed for speed rather than power. Step away from my husband, sister, Verina commanded, her crystalline veil replaced by a tactical visor. Your husband? Andira laughed sharply. Have you forgotten the terms of the ritual? He must choose. Harrison used the distraction to signal Walsh, who slipped away through a hidden passage they discovered in their earlier explorations. She carried vital information that needed to reach Earth. The standoff between the sisters crackled with tension. Through the broken wall, Harrison could see battles erupting across the city as forces loyal to each princess clashed. But something about the pattern of ship movements caught his military eye. The Void clans aren't just attacking the frontier, he said slowly. They're moving on the capital. Now. During your succession crisis. Both sisters turned to him. Verina's expression showed genuine shock, but Andira's face betrayed nothing. Of course they are, Andira said smoothly. Our enemies will always exploit division. Which is why strong leadership is needed. No, Harrison stepped forward, pieces clicking into place. This was your plan all along. Start a civil war, blame your sister, then use the Void clans to seize power. But you miscalculated one thing. And what's that? Your father. He saw it coming. That's why he chose me, not to choose between you, but to expose the truth. Andira's composure finally cracked. With blinding speed, she drew an energy weapon. Then you've made your choice. The room erupted in weapons fire as both sisters' forces engaged. Harrison dove for cover, his mind racing. The fate of two civilizations now hung on what happened in the next few moments, and he had one card left to play. Chaos reigned in the palace as Harrison executed his plan. While the sisters' forces clashed around him, he activated the emergency beacon Lieutenant Walsh had smuggled to him, a direct line to Earth's fleet, hidden and waiting just beyond the sector's edge. You think Earth's ships can reach us in time? Andira called out, her energy weapon carving glowing lines through the crystal walls. The Void clans will have taken the capital by then. They're not coming to fight, Harrison replied, ducking behind a fallen column. They're coming to reveal the truth. Through the breach in the wall, new ships appeared in the crimson sky, Earth vessels, sleek and dark against Nexaria's purple atmosphere. But they weren't firing. Instead, they were broadcasting. Holographic displays sprang to life across the city, showing intercepted communications between Andira and the Void clans. The evidence was damning, months of secret deals, planned attacks, and promises of shared power. Father discovered your betrayal, Verina said, her voice thick with emotion. That's why he was poisoned. Not by illness, but by his own daughter. Andira's forces, seeing the evidence of her treachery, began laying down their weapons. The princess herself stood rigid, her armor's light pulsing erratically. Everything I did was to make our empire stronger. By destroying it. Harrison stepped out from cover. Your father understood something you didn't. True strength comes from unity, not conquest. Unity made us weak. Andira raised her weapon, targeting her sister. The Void clans were right. Only the strong deserve to. Her words cut off as Harrison tackled her, the energy blast going wide. They crashed to the floor, her weapon skittering away. In the struggle, her armor's power core cracked, the light within fading. I did choose, Andira, Harrison said as guards secured her. I chose justice. The battle for the palace ended swiftly after that. The Void clans, seeing their ally captured and their plot exposed, retreated to their territories. Varina's forces secured the capital while Earth's ships maintained a protective perimeter. In the aftermath, Harrison stood before the Nexarian High Council. The marriage ritual, it was decided, would be annulled, its purpose fulfilled in exposing the plot against the Empire. "You never intended to choose between us," Varina said later, as they watched Andira being led to her trial. "You were investigating us both from the beginning." Harrison nodded. "Your father's last act was to create a situation where the truth would emerge. He knew someone with both diplomatic and military training would spot the inconsistencies. And now?" Varina's expression was unreadable behind her restored veil. "What becomes of our alliance?" "Something better," Harrison replied. "A true partnership between equals. Earth will help guard your borders, while Nexaria helps protect our colonies. Not through forced marriage or political games, but through mutual trust." The purple sky above was clear now, the emergency lights dimmed. Ships from both Earth and Nexaria moved in harmony through the stars, their crystal and metal hulls reflecting the light of distant suns. "My father would have liked that," Varina said softly. "He believed that strength comes in many forms." Harrison watched as workers began repairing the palace's crystal walls. The scars of battle would heal, just as the wounds between their peoples would mend. His marriage might have been a diplomatic accident, but its consequences had forged something far more valuable, understanding between two civilizations. "Your Majesty," a guard approached Varina. "The council awaits your coronation." As Harrison watched the new empress depart, he smiled slightly. Sometimes the greatest diplomatic victories came not from choosing sides, but from choosing truth. His tablet chimed, communications with Earth were fully restored. It was time to go home, leaving behind a stronger alliance than any marriage could have created. Above, the stars beckoned, promising new challenges and opportunities for both their peoples. The diplomatic incident that had started it all would become legend, a tale of how one man's accidental marriage had prevented a war and united two civilizations in true partnership. Commander Harrison's real work was just beginning.